Welcome to the 47th episode of the Hail Mary podcast. I'm A Toves, and I'm joined by my husband, the Toves. We're back to give our hot takes on our come-from-behind win over UTEP and throw some Hail Mary shots downfield for our listeners to love or hate. Let's get started. Don't call it a comeback. We've beaten UTEP for years. But in all seriousness, it took the biggest comeback in school history to take down UTEP on senior day. The first drive started sluggish and ended with a missed field goal. UTEP responded by punching us in the mouth and scoring 24 unanswered points. On the third touchdown, the UTEP quarterback jogged backwards into the end zone in front of the student section. It was a low moment of the game, but UTEP should have learned from watching North Texas play UTSA that you never start celebrating early against the Roadrunners. It was like the team suddenly woke up and said, you F around and you find out. From that moment on, UTSA outscored UTEP 34-7 on touchdown passes to Cephas, Franklin, and Ogle Kellogg, a pick six by Dadrian Taylor, and two clutch field goals from Sackett. UTSA did it the hard way, but for the first time, they ended the regular season undefeated in conference play, and they beat the Texas Triangle, North Texas, Rice, and UTEP. The Roadrunners end the regular season 10-2 and turn their attention to their second conference championship game. All right, before we get into the discussion on the game, our thoughts go out to Brendan Brady and Gavin Sharp. Absolutely heartbreaking to see their careers at UTSA end with such significant injuries. We wish them both a speedy recovery.
I think it was so hard seeing both of them, especially Gavin.
Yeah.
That was a terrible injury, but, I think seeing his tears, you just don't want it to end like that.
No, absolutely not. Don't have any updates on either one of them at this point. We're recording on Sunday, but hopefully by the time this podcast drops, we'll have a better idea of what they're looking at in terms of recovery.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's get on to the thoughts of the game. So to answer your question on that, let me give you, where do I start? Because let me give you this first thing. Frank Harris said post-game, and I quote, "Like I said, we went out there prosperous. We weren't playing our style of football. It was really embarrassing at first, honestly. But second half, we answered the call, went out there and executed." Look, the trailer and the team have repeatedly been talking during November just that all these November matchups are going to be UTSA versus desperate teams. Mm-hmm. What do you think caused UTSA to come out feeling prosperous against UTEP?
I know Traylor has said several times that he felt like this team could handle the expectations on them, unlike last year when it was new. But clearly, that's not the case. They still play better when they have a chip on their shoulder. They feel like they're being disrespected in some way. And you've got to remember, it's a lot harder to play with the weight of success on your shoulders than it is to have that chip on your shoulder. There aren't a lot of teams that can do that. I mean, if you look at the landscape of college football, outside of Alabama, it's been very hard to find a team that could really sustain that level of success year after year. So it's not a knock against this team. It's something that's new, and it's something that is a challenge for a lot of football programs. And obviously, this is a team that still is learning how to deal with that.
I love the way you said that. And just to add a little bit more, we've seen that Traylor is an emotional guy. Mm-hmm. And a team usually takes on the persona of their coach. And we've kind of talked about it before. And it feels like podcast episodes many episodes ago. But with this emotion at times, you're right. It just gets difficult to be, honestly, up all the time. Mm-hmm. And when you talked about the weight of the shoulders of success, just right there, it hit me that how new it really was. And, you went through and you kind of talked about that a little bit. And, it's difficult. We can talk about adversity and how people handle adversity, but, when people rise up against adversity, you feel like champions. But that success, and you look at it from more of an outside point of view when you go to work and you have success at work, how do you continue to sustain it? You don't keep doing the same things. You have to find new ways to challenge yourself and do that. And, this team has certainly seen its bit of adversity this season. And, I still think that they've got at least one more game in them that they're going to be really up for. I'm not saying that the bowl game they wouldn't be up for, but certainly it's going to be more of a sigh of relief after Friday.
Right.
So with that, and based on what you've said, I want to go on to my second thought for this, which is, UTSA has had issues handling success. Obviously, based on this game, we saw it last season, again, the same weekend. But, UTEP had difficulties handling success within the game.
Right.
Our friend Big Brown, who sat next to us, leaned over at one point and said, hey, look, this kind of reminds me of the UT game, where like UTSA shot and then kind of fizzled away. And really, it felt like the same thing from UTEP. It's like it's hard being a UTEP fan. I said it before. Like, when they said it's Jekyll and Hyde, I didn't realize just how Jekyll and Hyde it could be.
We saw it within one game.
Yeah.
I think they were talking about game to game, but we sort of saw this within that one game.
There was a couple sitting next to me during the game, which is they were UTEP fans. And it was kind of funny because she wasn't getting too high, but she also wasn't getting too low. And when I say getting too low, it's because, there really wasn't much low to get to. But as the game went on, as, everything was happening, I was like, at one point, I leaned over to you guys and I was like, I think we may pull this off. I was like, I think UTEP's going to lose. I muttered really under my breath. I think she heard me, and she said to her husband, yeah, we're going to lose. And at the very end of the game, near the end of the game, when they didn't get that, I think they got the interception when Clifford Chapman went up for that one. I want to say that's when they left.
Yeah.
And then we did not see them the rest of the game. And I guess that's what it feels like to be a UTEP fan. Like, it just, and I think, UTSA has been there before. Like, I don't want to minimize that at all. But, I still think Dana Dimel deserves every bit of criticism for how the way he handled this team in the second half.
Yeah.
Look, he mentioned that Calvin Brownholtz tore his hamstring on that big quarterback run. It was the 44-yard run. And eliminated these quarterback scrambles and rushing. But Dana Dimel is the offensive coordinator. And he just looked clueless in terms of how to adjust.
Right.
You've got, I mentioned Ronald Awatt, Deion Hankins as these terrific running backs, and they were gashing us. And then you also had Ray Flores, who I talked about being a wide receiver, but he honestly played both positions, and he did really well not only going in Wildcat, but also taking handoffs and rushing the ball. He was a physical guy. And, I think he was a former walk-on. So, that made it, I think, a little bit more important for UTEP, too. But, it's that moment of you're letting a walk-on just rush and gash all over you.
Right.
To me, there were things that UTEP could have done, but it just felt like Dimel had excuses. And I'll go into that a little bit later. But my last thought for you, did you notice how cocky and how much swagger UTEP played with?
Yeah.
Like, it felt like they were the team that was like 10, going to be going on 10-2 as opposed to UTSA. Any thoughts on that?
Like I said in the recap, that moment when Brownholtz sort of backs his way and like shuffles into the end zone and they're kind of taunting the students, was like, part of me was, this is the low. But then there was also that part of me that just flashed back to North Texas celebrating when they thought they had the fourth down stop and they were going to win the game, and UTSA, turns on a dime and, continues down the field, scores and wins. And so, it was like that moment, and then combine that with Gavin's injury, where I think the team was like, all right, we're going to stop playing with our food and we're going to, move on, and we're going to win this game.
I like that. Stop playing with our food. Because as a note, once that injury to Gavin occurred, UTC outscored UTEP 34-7 the rest of the way. A lot of pivotal moments, a lot of times that UTEP could have put it away, but they didn't. But yeah, I wanted to mention the taunting in the end zones because UTEP players are doing that both end zones. And I felt like, wow, like you're stirring up the tiger, Yeah, not only are you like doing that in front of like UTSA, but to stir up the crowd,
yeah,
you do realize this is a bigger crowd than what you're used to playing in front of. But I want to go to a quote from Michael Jordan in his last little doc, The Last Dance, because I thought it was important because you talked about Brownholtz kind of, waltzing into the end zone, but before that he had thrown a touchdown pass, and he came into the sideline, and since we sit on this, on the visiting sideline, he was going around saying, "This is my house. This is my house." And I was like, why? Like, why are you... I get it. This is probably your last college game. But why are you doing that? Especially when the fans are just going to get more riled up. And you get them more riled up, that means more crowd noise. So let me just give you this. Michael Jordan, what he said. "Let's see if all that trash talking starts when it's 0-0 instead of a 5 to 6 point lead. That's where it starts. That's a sign of a good man. If he can talk stuff when it's even score, or talk stuff when you're behind. When you're ahead, it's easy to talk." Yes, it was. It certainly was easy for them. But I really reveled in a disappointed look on their face as Sackett kicked that essentially winning field goal. And they realized that this is it. They will not be going anywhere. The only place they're going is back to El Paso, and they're going to be welcoming guests into the Sun Bowl because of the bowl game. They will not be going anywhere. I have never been a I hate UTEP or anything kind of guy in terms of a rival. Certainly I come off of it a little bit, but I like the fact that UTSA just ripped their effing hearts out and said, "You're not going anywhere."
Yeah, I mean, there are moments and there are people on the UTSA team that get chippy, and you know who they are. They get personal fouls, during the game. They get a little heated. But for the most part, we don't have that reputation. I mean, we say 2-0 nasty, but we really don't have that reputation of being, nasty or ugly or whatever in the field. And, then you have reports like the one we got after the game where JJ Perez tweeted out that one of the UTEP players punched a UTSA player after the game. We don't know who the UTEP player was. He didn't say who the UTSA player was, although it's been reported that it was Walker Beatty that got punched. And you just hear about those things, and it's like, it's just sad, that's how the team responds. It's like, look, you shouldn't have gotten that cocky during the game. You were playing a really good team. You got put back in your place, but there's just some things that are unnecessary.
Like I said, UTEP coming in like they've won 9 games, and they haven't. It's been a long time since they've been that successful. So to your point, to act like, get so upset and to end up just like punching someone, at that point, you know what? You deserve to go home.
Right.
I mean, if you can't stand there after you've blown a lead and just accept what occurred, life's going to be tough for you. I hope you enjoy watching the bowl games on TV this bowl game season.
Speaking of kind of conspiracies, at times it did seem like UTEP had a 12th man on the field. The refs. There were some questionable calls and no calls. I mean, there were some that were obviously good, fine, whatever, but that holding call on Lamont McDougal, I don't remember exactly where it was, but it was just ridiculous. He wasn't holding. And then you had all of these no calls against UTEP for holding. I mean, there was a reason at times that they were winning in the trenches because their offensive line was holding our defensive line. And then you have the no call pass interference or offensive pass interference in the fourth quarter against Mayfield. I mean, there were these moments where it was like, okay, are you trying to help him out, or what's going on here?
We rarely talk about refs, but yeah, I mean, it felt like CUSA was trying to stick it to us one last time. Yeah. I mean, they didn't really need to because I felt like UTEP had come out and had the right game plan. I will give Dimel credit here. They had the right game plan, and they came out with the right attitude on both lines. Mm-hmm. And I'll go a little bit deeper into it as we talk about the offense and defense. But certainly, it did help that they were able to, clutch on a little bit longer or tackle some of our, especially defensive line. I think just to add a little bit more to that, I think you're going to go back and look at this game, and we did that rewatch, and there were some moments where it really was tough to watch because it felt like this team was undisciplined at times. Mm-hmm. And, we've gone back and forth at times talking about the defense and, our defensive coordinator. But certainly, I guess when you're not ready to play, and you're not really, to me, giving the full effort, it's harder to correct those mistakes than it is when you're giving full effort. And even if you're too aggressive and you go out and you make a bad mistake, it's so much easier to correct that than it is like going half speed and you're just making mistake after mistake. And certainly it looked like we were sleepwalking that first quarter and a half.
I went through 2 major swings of emotion that brought to mind 2 very different games.
But I will say, you did not get a high heart alert this game, which was odd.
That I told you about.
Oh, here we go.
So, the beginning of the game was like having a flashback to the UTEP game in 2014 where we lost, I think it was 34-0, which prior to this game felt like just the worst offensive and defensive performance I've seen as a whole from UTSA. So, you kind of went from that emotion to, oh wow, I'm feeling like this is shades of the Memphis game. And then we basically had a walk-off field goal at the end. I mean, there were 3 seconds left and versus the 0 seconds in Memphis, but it was like this huge sway of emotions.
It's been talked about to death about the fact that, UTSA seems to succeed in one-score games. But as much as I scoff at that at times, like, okay, yeah, they play close games, but it's because it's the coaching, right? Mm-hmm. That experience, certainly against lesser teams, it helps. Because here, again, we go back to what we started with, handling success, right? UTSA did not have success. They were battling through adversity, those 2 big injuries, and all of a sudden, they start surging forward, like you said. And then UTEP just kind of falls off the edge. They can't handle success. They've never been there before. They don't know how to win or to close out games. And that's part of the lack of their culture on their team. So it ends up just kind of really coming full circle. And, I know as for us fans, it gets frustrating, but, I think it's fortunate this UTSA team has been in these situations, right? Because they certainly played like they knew exactly what they needed to do, and they did.
Yeah. Well, before we move on to talking about special teams, there are several reasons why this was a notable game for UTSA. So some of them we've already mentioned, but I think it just bears repeating.
Sure.
First of all, biggest comeback in school history. First time we went undefeated in conference play in Conference USA. First time we beat the Texas Triangle, North Texas, Rice, and UTEP. Also the last opportunity to do that and go undefeated in Conference USA play.
Right.
Second time that we won 10 wins in a season. 8th time we beat UTEP. 6th win in a row over UTEP. UTSA played its first conference game as a member of Conference USA against UTEP September 21st, 2013, and then ended its regular season play in Conference USA against UTEP. So kind of nice little bookend to the season there.
Absolutely. All right, let's go to the special teams review. I don't think we have too much here, but let's talk real quick about Jared Sackett, because I think you've got some facts for us.
Yeah, with the field goal that Jared made in this, the 2 field goals that Jared made in this game, he now holds the record the career record for made field goals at UTSA. His 51-yard field goal tied his career and is the 2nd longest field goal in school history. So, Jared kind of gets to bookend his career again, with all of this success.
Right.
So, and he's had, 4 weeks that he's been the Conference USA Special Teams Player of the Week. So it's got to be good for him, having left a team at UTSA that was not successful and looking like it wasn't on the right path. Really kind of having this sort of career that was, up and down and not finding probably what he was looking for when he left, to being able to come back, finish off his super senior season, break these records back at UTSA. It's got to be, something that really makes him feel like he's putting that right into his career.
That's really a fair point. I mean, look, we could nitpick the fact that he missed that first field goal pretty badly.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, from our seats, it did not look that bad. But then when we saw the replay, I was like, "Ooh, okay, that was a tough one." But here's the deal, and I think you were correct in saying that he's able to come back and find success. But he found success because his coach believes in him. Mm-hmm. Traylor really had, I think, no reason to just completely believe in him. But because he kind of knew him, because he really knows how to motivate, and I think he really knows how to coach up players. Jared had the confidence to go out there and just nail those last two. He could have missed the 51-yarder and then the 28-yarder to win the game. Mm-hmm. Instead, took deep breaths and gave him that final shot and said, "Win it for us," and win it he did.
Because absolutely nobody wanted to go to overtime. Including me.
You didn't want to go 5 overtimes like
no,
back in 2016.
That would have been a whole nother. Yeah, we would have gone from two different UTEP bad memories.
I don't know that you would have stayed in the stands with Big Brown and me.
No, probably not.
All right, let's go to the offensive review. We'll start with the keys to victory. I said keep the tempo high because UTEP has struggled against up-tempo teams, and they certainly did. The problem was that early on, because the offense was sputtering, they really couldn't get in that rhythm or that tempo. Mm-hmm. And, it didn't give UTEP fits until later in the game. And I was, I'll hold off on saying what I was about to say, but the second thing was take deep ball chances. This is where I think I'm struggling. What I was going to say just a couple seconds ago, UTEP decided to blitz Frank a lot and go man-to-man on the wide receivers. Certainly a bold strategy, and it did not pay off for them, in my opinion. They were aggressive, and they needed to come out and be aggressive, and that is all fair. But when you don't have the secondary to do it, your linebackers and line have to get to Frank every single time. And early on, they had the success, hence why they got up 24-0. But at some point, you need to start giving multiple looks and be able to call off the dogs a little to be able to manage the game. And Dimel did not. Neither did he tell his defensive coordinator, Pavetto, to stop blitzing. Instead, they kept doing the same thing. And it just felt like something we talked about before. I forget the quote, but it's like, what is the
definition of insanity?
Yes.
Doing the same thing over and over again? Yeah.
They did it over and over thinking, we'll get to him. We'll get to Frank no matter what. And they weren't getting there, and they were leaving cornerbacks just by themselves on islands. And, you talked about the three wide receivers getting touchdowns. Cephas going almost, and maybe should have been flagged. Again, a no call that I think was benefited by UTSA, as he looked like he started going towards the line of scrimmage at the very end of him going in motion. But him looking like he's about to go block and then just taking off. Mm-hmm. The cornerbacks were just left right there, just in an island. 65
yards downfield.
And then Zakari kept being left one-on-one, which honestly surprised me. So it's like, why?
Yeah.
North Texas, I think, has better cornerbacks, way better cornerbacks than, UTEP does, and North Texas isn't dumb enough to do that. I don't understand why, again, the definition of insanity, as you just said.
Yeah, doing the same thing over, expecting a different result.
And then Tyke. My man is 6'4", 6'5", something like that. And the quarterback that was guarding him was much shorter.
Right.
It kind of looked like me trying to guard Tyke. And to be honest with you, UTEP might have had better hope with me guarding him, because that cornerback just kept getting burned. And I felt like at times Frank maybe took a little bit of pity on him, but I don't understand why they kept, Tyke stepped up, first of all. Second of all, why they kept allowing that to go happen over and over. Again, just like I said, you're doing the same thing over and over. Do you think that Frank's not going to notice this? Do you think that Frank is a freshman starter? I mean, he's not. So they punched us in the mouth. This offensive line was getting dominated by that UTEP defensive line. And, in my opinion, the UTEP defensive line won the game if you were going just, UTEP defensive line versus UTSA offensive line. And we saw it through the PFF scores. You said that Terrell Haynes and Venley Tatafu their PFF scores were terrible, and they
Yeah.
were really bad scores. But once Walker Beatty and Payne Hebert came in to replace them,
Yeah, it was night and day. I mean, the pass blocking scores for Terrell and Vinley, obviously they're still shaking off some cobwebs. I mean, they were very, very low. And it was just eye-opening to see the significant difference between Walker Beatty and Payne Hebert and Terrell Haynes and Vinley Tadafu. And so I was kind of surprised that Traylor left them out there as long as he did. But, I know he doesn't really like to shake up things on the O-line, but at some point, you kind of had to wonder, look, they're not playing well. Why are you continuing to leave them out there? Maybe they need some, rest sooner.
he always talks about the fact that the best way to motivate is to put guys on the pine.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to what you just said, the best way to motivate both those guys that were struggling, put them on the pine.
Well, yeah, and probably part of the reason they weren't doing so well is because they're still coming back from injury. So
Right.
That. I mean, again, it's not just because they're having a bad day, so, I mean, he obviously did make the switch, but it looked like, I think, the two had somewhere around maybe 16 snaps, so it likely was either late in the game. I mean, I couldn't tell you exactly when they switched, but it was either late in the game or, somewhere where it kind of became sort of intermittent. But yeah, Beatty and Ebert had 17 snaps each. It might have helped if they would have come in sooner.
And really, this UTSA offense only had like 52 snaps. So,
Yeah.
they did go big play. So, that kind of played into it. But, to your point, I thought Walker Beatty just played really well.
Yeah.
I think, that it's weird thinking back again, just to reiterate that he was defensive lineman to begin the year, and now he's filled in the left tackle spot, and he looks
like he belongs. Absolutely.
Yeah, like he's been the missing piece forever. So, it's obviously great to have him, really develop in this way, but also to step up even in this big game at a tough moment where the offense is struggling, and here he comes in and he takes care of business.
Yeah, it was interesting to go back and look at the stats for the offense. We managed to get 458 yards of offense, 382 yards passing, 76 yards rushing. That was our lowest rushing yards all season. I think it's the only game we've had below 100 yards. Obviously, Brady getting hurt didn't help. And it seemed like at times Kavorian had some decent runs, but then I think he only had 55 yards at the end of the game. So it was just interesting to see that after, game after game after game where we really had started to build up our run game. We were getting consistently over 200 yards, much more balanced offense, that this game was kind of the complete opposite. We went back to pass heavy, but that's what we needed to do to win. And the great thing is we have that ability to do that.
Absolutely. I mean, look, the last few teams didn't really necessarily have that front seven. I talked about in the preview how this front seven for UTEP was talented. So it felt like they were really wasting this defense on just a bad offense. And, this front seven really did cause a lot of havac. Go back to another team that caused a lot of havoc, and I think you can say even bookend, Houston.
Right.
Houston caused a lot of havoc for this, UTSA team, and they bottled up the run. That was honestly our lowest rush total of the season
Until this
game. And so it was only 104 yards against Houston. So, I think that it was weird for UTSA to have to go back to that bombs away approach that they had last season. But, again, as I talked about, I don't understand why UTEP kept leaving their corners in one-on-one coverage. But, that's what they decided to do. And that's exactly what UTSA took advantage of.
Yeah, I mean, Frank had 2 clutch long passes, 65-yard touchdown pass to Cephas, and a 70-yard touchdown pass to Tyke. That 70-yard touchdown pass to Tyke was the longest completion of Frank's career.
And, until you had talked about that, you had told me that, before we were, kind of doing the notes for this pod, I thought it was the safest catch, but then I just, to be honest with you,
I mean, 65 versus 70 yards from the stands, it's kind of hard to tell the difference.
well, that, and like, you've seen so many moments from Frank where he has bombed away that you just kind of like, everything just seems long at that moment. Even if it was just a 14-yard touchdown pass like Sakari caught, it all seems like long, and there's just so many brilliant moments from Frank that it was terrific to see him come back and lead this team.
Yeah, he averaged 23.9 yards per completion in the game, the most yards per completion in school history, beating the previous record held by Dalton Sturm, who had averaged 21 yards per game against Rice back in 2015.
Interesting.
The great thing about this young program is that we get to like quote all of these career stats or best game of the season stats. They just keep coming and coming.
That is the fun part, and it is something that they use for recruits. So,
absolutely.
With that, let's talk about the offensive player of the game. It's Tyke Ogle-Kellogg. 4 catches, 142 yards. Had the 1 touchdown. Obviously, the one you talked about was a 70-yard touchdown catch. We've been wondering. JT got injured for the season, and so it was like, well, Tyke's gonna have to come up, step up, and he did.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear Frank's post-game comments about him. He said, Tyke's always been able to do those things. It's about time that he showed up. He said he's like a little brother to him, and that he holds him to a very high standard. So it was interesting to hear, Frank and the way that he talks about, Tyke and their relationship.
And, I'm just glad that he was able to have that moment too. And obviously, we've been hoping that Tyke could actually get to his potential. And Traylor's talked about it before, but it's also just good to have the guy just have a great moment at a crucial time. There's another opportunity to have more crucial moments coming up in the championship game. With that, let's go off to the defense. Keys to the victory. I talked about stopping the run because neither quarterback is a proficient passer. I didn't know who was going to start, whether it was going to be Gavin Hardison or Calvin Brownholtz. Well, I talked about Calvin Brownholtz, and I said, hey, look, he's a scrambler. He can move around. He did that against Rice and, almost pulled off that win. Well, he gashed us quite a bit, as did the entire running game, because, honestly, this UTEP offense got quite dynamic when they came out with Brownholtz at quarterback. I kind of said, no, he's a poor man's Dalton Sturm. And honestly, he played like a poor man's Dalton Sturm. There was a lot of plays that were called for him where it was clearly suited to his abilities. And because of it, that's where UTEP really took advantage of this UTSA defense. The other thing was, watch out for play action. We got burned a few times on the play action. One of them was for a touchdown. There was other few big gains. But again, what it really comes down to is the fact that UTEP was never really able to be consistent on offense. And that has always been what's held them back in the Dana Dimel era. And I still think that even though we talked about UTEP offensive line was holding UTSA's defensive line quite a bit, I still felt like their offensive line, which I said was solid, they were able to be more physical than the UTSA front seven, to be honest. And that's why UTEP really was able to control the game early on. After, that Gavin Sharp injury, it really came down to the fact that UTEP just couldn't really, I'd say, execute at a high level and continue executing at the high level that they had already set in terms of their standards beginning of the game. And because of that, I felt like that's really why they fell apart. Because, honestly, I gave you two keys to victory here, and both were failed by the defense.
Right.
So, I mean, if I told you that prior to the game, would you have thought that UTSA wins?
No. And, there were a couple moments where I thought Brownholtz had some very smart plays where you could see him hiding behind his O-line, waiting very patiently for an opening. And then as soon as that opening came, man, he hit it. And, I thought a couple of times, like, it'd be interesting to see Frank do something like that because, he can accelerate quite a bit. Usually Frank, even when he has those quarterback designed plays, he's not kind of sitting back waiting. He's taking the ball and taking off. So it'd kind of be interesting to see something like that in our offense with Frank because I think he could really take off in those moments.
It was very K-State-ish because that's exactly what Kansas State used to run because Dana Dimel was their offensive coordinator.
Right.
But these aren't the plays that they were running under Gavin Hardison.
No.
And I'll ask you the question later, but I think that, this UTSA defense had Brownholtz not torn the hamstring and been able to scramble around a little bit more. I don't know that this outcome stays the same. Now, UTSA had some leeway here. They didn't have to win the game, but let's be honest, this was something that they, I think, really wanted to close out like undefeated. And, I just go back to this just left defense at times being frustrating. I mean, they're so talented, and aggressive, but at times so undisciplined because they were getting caught, like I said, in terms of the play action pass. There was a point where their fullback, on a play action pass, Nick Troy Fortune tried to hand off. It looked like hand off to one of the safeties, and the safety was coming up to stop the run. I don't know what defense he was playing, but again, it goes back to the fact that you've got cornerbacks and safeties not on the same page, and that's Jess Lepp's area. Now, it's also Nick Graham's area, but those two have to figure out how to get this done because it's just happened way too many times, and I think we've talked about it to death, but this is a similar offense that we're going to see with North Texas. And we saw how North Texas took advantage, of this UTSA defense going full out to stop the run. They cannot get fooled by play action. I'm not saying that it's easy to play defense, but a little more discipline here and, a little more game study will tell you, yeah, you want to give full effort, but again, be smart about how you approach the game.
Right.
Let's go to our defensive player of the game. For me, it was DeAdrian Taylor. I thought, again, we've talked about like he's kind of the heart and soul of this defense. After Rashad went out, he's been the guy. And it was feared when he essentially got injured against Texas that it might be for the season.
Right.
I'm going to say that I'm glad that it wasn't season-ending injury because he recorded 3 tackles, all solo. But that pick 6 that he had, that 73-yarder, he also forced a fumble, but that 73-yard pick 6 was crucial because, again, we talked about the fact that UTEP was starting to drive again. They had gotten into the red zone, or starting to get into the red zone, and DeAdrian just stands there, catches the ball, which is the biggest thing, but the next biggest thing after that was the fact that his defense essentially cleared the way, and he followed all the blocks. I mean, he did play offense before, so...
Yeah, I mean, that is the advantage of playing in Shriner, Texas, that he got to play probably every position at some point in time.
Followed his blocks into the end zone, but, I thought he really played a good game. I think he wreaked some havoc, so...
Yep.
That's my guy.
And that 3rd career pick 6 for Dadrian now gives him the career record for pick 6 returns at UTSA. He has 3 of them. The other 2 were against Texas A&M in 2019 and Louisiana Tech in 2021. It was also the 2nd longest play by a Roadrunner this season behind Chris Carpenter's 99-yard kickoff return. All right, so what did we learn from the game?
So I made this offhand remark in terms of the preview of UTEP when I said, to me, coaching matters, and and Traylor is the better coach. Let's look at some of these things. Traylor gets that halftime speech, which they talk about being...
unique.
There you go. He doesn't do it every single game, but he knows when to pull unique speeches at halftime and when not to. And that's what I've seen from most successful coaches is, you don't always get on the guys. You figure out how to do what you do. Second, once again, you see his time management. He had all of his timeouts essentially near the end of the game. We'll get to how that was crucial. And then, honestly, the way he manages the game in terms of seeing that 2 of his offensive linemen aren't playing well, and we talked about during the offensive review that he switches them out and says, I'm going with these 2 other guys. What head coach does that? Like you kind of alluded to it. He talks about the fact that he wants continuity with the offensive lineman. He doesn't want to be rotating guys in and out. Yet he goes in and does it because it's going to give his team the best chance to win. it's easy when you say it like that, but how many coaches actually do it?
Right. And certainly we nitpicked when he did it, but, he did.
Sure.
He made the adjustment.
And, I often say, well, that's why they pay their big bucks. And I can't say enough stuff about Traylor. As much as, we like to nitpick him, there are certainly plenty of his attributes that you can see of why Dr. Campos had to have seen something in him as a head coach when she interviewed him. There's certainly ways, you talk about the culture, you talk about all this other stuff, but when I see him manage a game, I never feel like I have to question when he's taken a timeout, when he's done certain things. Earlier in the season, we kind of questioned some of the times because it was so odd that he was doing some of the things he was doing. But
I think that really related more to the staff adjustment, in hindsight, because he had so many coordinators and assistants kind of changing roles. That first game, there were some growing pains there.
Fantastic point, because I wanted to ask you is, do you think that's what it alluded to? So I think the second thing there, though, is just this is what UTSA has needed for a long time. A coach that can see the big picture, that can go to the games and say, this is how we're going to play the game, and these are the adjustments. If we need to make them, this is what we're going to have to do. And not complain afterwards about, the breaks just didn't come our way.
Right.
I say that because the next thing I think we learned is from a UTEP fan perspective, what do you make of Dana Dimel? Look, he used all of his timeouts in the second half with 10 minutes left in the game.
Right.
10 minutes left in the game. Your offense has been struggling. I get Calvin Brownholtz tore his hamstring. Hey, he looked like he was moving around, though. So
yeah.
I get that he couldn't rush the ball, but you could have made adjustments, and you didn't.
Right.
Yet, you go right across the field, and just like I talked about, Traylor takes out the whole, left side of his offensive line and puts in two new offensive linemen. The second thing I'm going to go here with Dana Dimel is, did he make a mistake not having Calvin Brownholtz as a starter the entire season? I mean, this offense looks dynamic.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, in hindsight, absolutely. One of the things that I think is interesting about comparing Dimel to Traylor, again, maybe Brownholtz had terrible practices at the beginning of the season. Maybe there were things that, we obviously don't know that were happening behind the scenes. But to me, Dimel put Hardison into an offense that maybe wasn't 100% suited for him. It seemed like this offense really was better suited for someone like Brownholtz. And if you take that and then compare it or contrast it, I should say, with what Traylor did, where, when he came to UTSA, I don't think Frank Harris was the quarterback he had in his mind in terms of what he wanted for the offense. And I say that because he recruited
Josh Adkins.
Yeah, he recruited Josh Adkins, who obviously is a different type of player. So to me, it tells me he's looking more, Josh Adkins, Eddie Lee, they're more pocket passers. But he had Frank, and he had issues on his offensive line, and he needed that mobile quarterback who could scramble. And so instead of being stubborn and putting that, Josh Adkins there, I mean, obviously he put him into play, he got hurt. But instead of being stubborn and trying to just continue to build that offense around what he wanted, he said, look, I'm going to take what I have and I'm going to figure out how to make it work. And at the end of the day, Frank flourished in that. UTSA flourished in that. And Traylor probably has changed some of his perspective. Who knows what the quarterback of the future was going to look like, because, again, we'll get to it in a second. We don't know what Frank's, future is going to be. But it'll be interesting to see, really what Traylor does with the offense, when he has his recruits. But again, if he would have just stuck to his, this is the offense I want to run, I don't think he would be successful. And you see, I think that's what Dimel did. Instead of saying, look, Gavin Hardison, if he really was the better option between the two preseason, build your offense around him to make him a shining star. And that's not what he did.
They they didn't really have the wide receivers, but two, he's not mobile.
Right.
And so you're limited in what you can do with him.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about the K-State type offense where you said, oh, that'd be kind of cool for Frank to do, right? Like hide behind the offensive line, then like take off. And I said, oh yeah, that was totally K-State stuff. Brownholtz did it easily.
It's very natural.
Like any K-State quarterback I've ever seen. And early on, UTEP, Dana Dimel had a quarterback similar to that. And so, yeah, switching to Hardison was just odd because I think he's just in love with that big arm.
Mm-hmm.
But I've talked about how the big arm is not accurate, how he just isn't a very good passer, doesn't really have that kind of pocket sense. It's baffling to me. But you know what? That's for you, and that's why I think UTEP fans are frustrated. But I'm going to ask this as from a UTEP fan perspective: is it time up? Is time up for Dana Dimel, because his post-game presser, that's a tongue tied there. Post-game presser sounded like he was never at fault for anything. For every quote that he said is an excuse about something. He does not take any sort of accountability. Contrast that to UTSA's coach, Jeff Traylor. What does Jeff Traylor always do at his post-game pressers? That's on me as a head coach. I need to prepare them better. I need to do this. I need to do this for my team. I need to do this. I didn't do this for my team. I didn't put them in a great situation. He always takes accountability. And if you're always... Let me back up. As a UTSA fan, you could talk about, and you could use this for anything, but you can talk about death, taxes, and Jeff Traylor taking accountability for any sort of mistake after any of the games that UTSA plays.
I thought for a second there you were going to go with the death, taxes, and Rick Stockstill getting a 1-year contract extension.
Well, we could do that too, right?
We'll get to that.
Okay. But I'm using that line simply because that's exactly what you know he's going to say. So I was really intrigued when I saw that Dimel did not ever do that. And for a veteran head coach, it goes back to that stubbornness that I think you talked about. Let me give you this first quote. It was about UTSA's offense. We out-physicaled them. They just threw some balls over the top. That's their offense. They just threw it over the top. Does that sound like a man that knows how to win a game?
No. And you know what? Yeah, of course they threw it over the top. Have you watched this offense? Have you seen Frank Harris and the wide receivers? I mean, granted, we have, Tyke instead of JT, but he made some pretty impressive catches.
We spoke really or discussed at length just a little while ago about the fact that, what the, definition of insanity is. That right there tells you I don't know how to win because I'm going to keep doing the same thing. And it speaks to the stubbornness that you were talking about. I don't know. I was frustrated just from the UTEP fan perspective. I'm not even a UTEP fan. But I also enjoyed the fact that he blamed UTSA playing music over the loudspeaker between plays, which in his opinion was illegal. But I went back to look for the rules. I said, I've got to figure out, is he right? Because we've been doing a lot of this throughout the season. And Texas did it when we went up to watch the game in Austin. But here's the only rule that I could find. It was updated in 2021. Artificial crowd noise by conference policy or mutual consent of the institutions is allowed. The noise level must be consistent throughout the game for both teams. However, all current rules remain in effect dealing with bands, music, and other sounds. When the snap is imminent, the band/music must stop playing. We had to rewatch this game because that's just how we prepare for this pod. But I told you, let's listen to see if the music was playing close to the snap.
And it wasn't. Now, Dimel also mentioned that they were playing during the huddle, and that's why Brownholtz had some issues. Well, again, this rule doesn't say you can't play music when the offense is huddling. It says you have to stop when the snap is imminent. And by the time they were on the line of scrimmage, the music had stopped.
I go back to, once again, a man that is stubborn and did not seem to prepare for a trip to the dome.
Yeah, and honestly just sounds like somebody who's trying to justify why he shouldn't be fired.
I don't think he gets fired, but those answers alone as an AD would tell me you are not the guy. And I've talked already before that I don't think Dimel's the guy. He only really had one successful coaching stint, and that was at Wyoming. Sorry, I just gonna giggle thinking about Wyoming as successful. But then he went to Houston and then just bombed. He went back to K-State, and then he got the UTEP job. I think it's time to make a change at UTEP, and I think they need to do it in order to actually compete in Conference USA, because even just listening to UTEP fans, hearing how some of them were talking at the game, they were excited that they were up, but they also knew that the bottom could fall out at any moment, and it did.
It did, yeah. All right, so moving on from that, we also learned this week some of the seniors who plan to come back. So Traylor said that the seniors who did not take part in senior day had committed to returning next year. Some of those notable names include Ernesto Almaraz, Trumaine Bell, Josh Cephas, Nick Troy Fortune, Mackay Hart, Brandon Matterson, Tyke Ogle-Kellogg, and Rashad Wisdom. Mackay, Brandon, and Rashad had also already said that they were going to come back. Those that did participate in senior day, that doesn't mean they're not going to come back unless they're obviously out of eligibility. It just means that they haven't decided yet. A lot of them are waiting for their draft grades. So we'll hear more about that towards the end of the season. Frank's been very non-committal. It was interesting. He kind of started the season off making it sound like he was going to come back. Now he sounds a little, back and forth. I think one of the things that'll be interesting, and that Greg Lucas shared when he did his wrap-up with JJ Perez, was that because we were going into the American next season, there may be more of a reason for some of these seniors to come back into their super senior season, because, I think they want that challenge of, look, probably unlikely that we'll be, going for a third conference championship game. Not to say it's impossible. You never know what's going to happen. But I think there's that challenge of stepping up conferences, making that transition, having, even a higher level of competition. And I think a lot of those seniors are motivated by that, particularly if they think, maybe going into the NFL isn't going to work out, or they need more, to prove that they can be a draft pick. So I think it just kind of adds another element that wouldn't have been there, if we were staying in Conference USA.
Very well said. Very well said.
My last question for you, or I guess I have two questions for you, but the first question for you is, looking at the amount of injuries that we've sustained throughout the season, and then knowing that we had Gavin Sharp and Brendan Brady injured in this game, are you concerned about the health of the team going into the championship game next week?
In some positions, yes. Obviously running back is, I don't know who else we got besides Justin Rodriguez. Is it Ty Edwards season again? Ty Edwards has played 3 games officially. Mm-hmm. He's got one more game, before he can redshirt this season. Doesn't sound like he's going to come back, so they could play him in another game, which would be this championship game. What a way to show essentially what type of player you are by playing in this championship game and making an impact. But kind of up to the coaching staff whether they trust him or not.
Yeah, or do they go with what we saw last season, which was the sincere workhorse, and just put it all on Kavori and Barnes?
It's certainly possible. I think tight ends, I wouldn't say I'm as worried.
Yeah, Gavin was the third string.
Yeah. Again, still terrible to see, his injury and him, essentially not getting to play in these last 2 games.
Yeah, but you some of the younger guys you could probably bring in to help out.
Right. Now, the thing is, you're going to be asking for them to do it. If you're going to do it this next game, you're going to do it at probably one of the most nerve-wracking games that they're going to play.
Right.
So, there is that element too. I just think that as long as they prepare, it's like going into a test, right? Right. As long as you prepare for the test, you're going to have those jitters, but you should perform well. And I think, in terms of what we've seen from this coaching staff, I think they'll be prepared. I just think running back is where the question's at. can you get Corian Barnes through, I hate to put it this way, the entire game healthy? Because after that, it gets really dicey in terms of running back depth.
Right. All right, and my last question. UTSA was ranked number 23 in the AP, number 24 in the coaches poll. Will we be ranked in the college football playoff rankings?
Asking me right now, I say no. I think, you can talk about the college football committee and what they are and what they're not. I'll say this. There is no formula. You do your performance appraisal for the year. You know exactly what you need to achieve or what the goals are in order to be, get rated a 5 or a 4. If those are the highest grades on your performance appraisals. But in terms of college football playoff, it's incredibly subjective.
Right.
So I know that it wouldn't be a big deal if they got UTSA in at number 25 in terms of the way they may be seeing it. UTSA fans would obviously, be rejoicing. I mean, it's just, what does it matter at this point? At this point, just, you're ranked over here in AP and coaches poll, and I think that really matters more than college football playoff.
Yeah, I was honestly surprised to see us ranked in both of the polls after this game. I mean, while several teams above us did lose, my concern was that they were going to look at how we won this game and what it took and say, and kind of dismiss basically our achievement based on that.
It really goes back to the fact that, look, you can diss the schedule, but you can only play who you played, right? And they've taken care of business, whether it's been a close game or not. So, I'm fine with it. All right, let's do our championship preview. This probably won't be too long because of the fact that we've obviously reviewed North Texas before.
Right.
And if you really want to catch up on some of the key players from North Texas, I would say go back to one of our earlier episodes, episode 41, which was our FIU game review, because that has the bulk of the important players for North Texas and some of those keys at that time and matchups. I will say, with the win earlier in the season against North Texas, the series is tied 5-5. Of course, right? Going into the championship game, it's going to be 5-5. And Seth Luttrell is now 4-3 against UTSA, 1-2 in the trailer era. After the loss to UTSA, North Texas has gone 3-1. They've kind of stumbled offensively in the last two games against UAB and Rice, kind of putting up only 264 and 362 yards respectively, but giving up 498 and 415. 415 to Rice.
Wow. I mean, that's... Yeah.
Meanwhile, UTSA has gone 4-0 and stayed pretty consistent on offense and defense. But you know what those stats mean? Absolutely nothing.
Right.
Because it's come down to this one final game in Conference USA for both North Texas and UTSA.
Man, Judy's got to be hating the fact that she's going to have to crown someone who's leaving.
And I love the way you put it because since 2017, the CUSA champion has been won by a school going to the AAC next season. And obviously this one's not going to be any different because both North Texas and UTSA will be in the AAC next year. Look, I'll give you these simple keys to victory because I think, it really summarizes everything that needs to happen on both sides of the ball. But defensively, get off the field by limiting the third down conversions. UNT was 7 of 15 the first game on third down. What does it do? That means that, we're limiting them staying on the field, and that's what's important here. If we can get the defense some rest, UTEP outplayed us in terms of offensive plays, 72 to, I believe it was either 72 to 52 or 78 to 52. It was quite a margin. We haven't really seen that from UTSA perspective most of this season. So when it comes to North Texas, they're going to have a similar game plan to UTEP. They're going to want to grind that clock, and I think that's going to present them the best chance to win, especially the fact that that they can hit some big plays. That they can do some damage.
Yeah, occasionally Austin Ani can throw. We learned that the hard way.
Look, I will say this about Ani. UNT can criticize them all they want, but it's not like they have a Gavin Hardison. It's not like they have like, some of these other bad CUSA quarterbacks. They've got a guy that can do the job. And that's all that Seth Luttrell has asked of his UNT team. The other key to victory for this UTSA defense is tackle, 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 because that means that they're limiting that rush yardage, and going back to those big plays, they're limiting big plays. Big plays are going to happen. It's just the nature of the game. The way it's so based offensively, both teams can get away with some big plays. But in limiting big plays from both teams, this game gets a little closer. And I'm not going to get too into it yet. I'll give you some thoughts as I go into my way too early prediction. But our offensive keys to victory, I'm going to keep it simple. Just let Frank cook. Look, he just needs to be anything and everything for UTSA, and that's what he's been throughout his career. You talked about the fact that he hasn't made his decision. This could be the last time you see Frank Harris in a UTSA uniform in the Dome. We could go back and forth whether he will return for another season, but the reality is this is the last time as a member of CUSA that Frank Harris will be suiting up at quarterback. So, without a backup running back that you can really talk to, like we just talked about right now in terms of some of those injuries, with some other things really affecting this team, it's Frank. Just give it to Frank and let him take this offense and let him do what he's done all season and lead this team to victory. So for my way too early prediction, look, much like UTSA, I'm 10-2 on my picks. So I'm pretty good. I've been on a win streak for a while. So I'm just going to say that, all right? Since the Texas game, I've been on a win streak. So, it's mirrored, UTSA as well. To me, this is how it should be. You got rivals playing each other for supremacy of the conference. I know for you it's going to be nerve-wracking because of the fact it's North Texas and just the amount of trouble they've given UTSA, including the game earlier this season. I expect another physical matchup with plenty of surprises from both teams. They're each going to take big swings at each other because A, it's your rival, and 2, again, like I said, it's for the conference title.
And it's the last time that they can say, either one of them can say they were in a Conference USA conference championship.
Right. I believe UTSA's offense is going to start slow and then kick into gear by the second quarter. And this defense, I think, is going to come out fired up because of the dome noise from UTSA fans. But let's remember, because it's a championship game, and it's probably one of the stupidest rules I've heard, but because we're hosting it, it's got to be neutral. So the announcer is not going to be able to either play music, nor is he going to be able to egg on the crowd. So for all you UTSA fans that listen to this, you're going to have to pump up the noise.
We have to be our own Pillikillis.
Yeah, when North Texas has the ball on offense. We're the ones that are going to have to ratchet up the noise. We're going to the ones that have to be doing that. I will real quick call out these 2 kids that were sitting in front of us during the UTEP game that were doing just that. And I hope they're there again, because if they are, they're going to fire up a lot of the adults that were around our section, because they were firing me up when they were doing that. I was like, I'm not really a guy that's going to make a lot of noise. I'll clap, but those 2 kids, I hope they're there and they put them on the big screen so they can fire us up.
That's right.
Look, it's what's been meant to be since the beginning of this year, really for both teams. Both teams, I think, have been the 2 best teams in Conference USA these last 2 years. Give me UTSA 34-27 over UNT for the second straight CUSA championship.
All right. Before we go, let's talk about what else happened in Conference USA this weekend. Obviously, we didn't say this, but you can figure it out by now. North Texas beat Rice 21-17. Rice had a shot to come through and give us Western Kentucky in that final instead, and couldn't do it.
Oh, Rice. But hey, you know what? They may end up being bowl eligible. So.
Yeah, it looks like they have a pretty good chance, because it doesn't look like enough teams are going to make it. Army and I forgot what other school, but there's one other school that have 6 wins, but there's 2 wins against FCS teams. So unless they get waivers, it looks like Rice will go bowling. So
good for them.
Good for them. I mean, I'm not sure who their quarterback's going to be, but
Well, they started A.J. Padgett in this game, who's the last quarterback that UTSA
Last man
faced.
standing?
Yeah, the last man standing for played against UTSA. But, the fact that he was able to put 17 points and put them in a position to potentially beat North Texas in Denton.
Yeah. That's pretty impressive.
Yep.
Western Kentucky beat FAU in overtime, 32-31, and then FAU fired their coach after the game.
As would I if I lost to Western Kentucky, because Western Kentucky has been trashed this season, and their fans are thumping their chest again like they're awesome. No, you're not.
UAB beat La Tech 37-27 and achieved bowl eligibility. They're heading to the Bahamas, so you guys can check that bowl off your list if you're looking at the potential bowl sites that UTSA might go to.
It's a shame. I would have liked to be at a Bahamian resort beach.
I know, but it's just not meant to be.
I will say this about UAB. Good for them. They've been through a lot of adversity. You talked about it even when we did the review that, it kind of sucks that they don't know who their head coach is going to be. That hasn't been resolved at all. So because of it, again, good for them. They get to go and, enjoy a beach and, I think beat up whoever shows up to play them.
And then Middle Tennessee beat FIU 33-28. Middle Tennessee, just such an odd school. And like we said earlier, death, taxes, and their coach getting a year extension. I mean, okay. I'm not sure that this season, outside of beating Miami, I'm not sure how this season warranted that. But hey, whatever. And they get to stay in Conference USA. So maybe next year, I don't know. Maybe they'll be the champions. Who knows?
I thought I had words, but you know what? Let's just move on because I don't know.
On the basketball front, the women's team had a tough run in the Las Vegas Invitational. They lost to Missouri State 74-51 and St. John 69-64. Their next game is against Texas State on Wednesday in San Marcos. So any of you that are able to maybe make it up to San Marcos, go out and support them. Then they'll go on their break for finals. They'll be back in the Convocation Center Saturday, December 10th against Idaho. Men's basketball team was off to their best start since, I think, 2010 with their win against Prairie View A&M 82-75, and then Grambling happened. Wow, UTSA started off poorly, but unlike the football team, they couldn't overcome that deficit and lost 75-55.
I thought you were going to say, don't call it a comeback, because there wasn't one.
It was not, yeah. Followed that up Sunday with an overtime loss to Dartmouth, 78-77. They will be back in action on Monday against UIW to wrap up the 2-0 San Antonio shootout. Likely this pod will drop after that result, so not sure what's going to happen. But they will also have a break for finals, hopefully have a chance to regroup before their next game on December 10th against New Mexico.
They really need it. I mean, they, again, keep falling back into bad habits. Mm-hmm. And, I get that you get an open three-point shot, but if you're not making it, you got to try something new. Again, going back to the definition of insanity. Just keep shooting the three until I make it. Okay, great, but if you shoot the team out of the game, I get you went 1 for 7, but it was that 0 for 6 really killed the team.
Whew. Well, on that note, that about wraps it up for us at the Hail Mary podcast. I'm May Toves.
And I'm the Toves.
We'll be back next week to recap our second championship win.
Birds up.